This is Mayor Ron Anders, and today we are proud to have our fourth installment of the One Auburn, One Conversation series. Our special guest today is a dear old friend of mine, a man that I met when we were little boys playing ball together, and we grew up in Auburn City Schools together, played football at Auburn High School together. We've raised little girls together, and here we are, still friends after all these years. Mr. Desmond Scaife, how are you doing today, Desmond?
I'm great, man. Anders, how are you?
I'm doing fine, and thank you for taking time out of your schedule to be a part of the One Conversation series.
Yes, sir. Glad to be here.
For those of you who are guests today, Desmond went by Debo. That's the only name I ever knew he had. I didn't know he was Desmond until we were about in 10th grade. He was a great football player at Auburn High School, and Debo was a year older than I was, and as we grew up, I had this respectful fear of Debo because he was this superstar athlete and a great guy. And then as we were teammates together at Auburn High, we developed a great friendship. But Debo, if you just give our audience kind of a little bio on you and your family and who you are.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Anders, and you wasn't a pushover yourself now. I am who I am because of my family, the people in my neighborhood and in my community. My mother is Dolores Scaife, who attended Lee County Training School and Borkin Street School and Drake High, and went on to Knoxville College for a couple of years. She served as a librarian at Borkin Street School before becoming secretary at Los Polka High School, which she retired from in 2004 after 33 years. My maternal grandmother was Johnny Mae Gibson, who spent most of her life as domestic help in the North. She was part of the Great Migration. With her living in the North, it was always exciting when she came to visit us because back then you could go to the airport gate and sometimes they let you out to go to the plane. It provided us an opportunity to see a bigger airport and airplanes. My father was the late George Scaife, who attended Lee County Training School, Borkin Street School, Drake High School, and went to Grambling College for 2 years, and which is now known as Grambling State University. He earned a football scholarship from the late Coach Eddie Robinson, where he played for him for 2 years, and I still have that sweater on. I don't know if you ever remember me, man, a gold G sweater. That was my dad's letter sweater from Grambling, and I still have it. Dad is said to have been one of the best athletes of his time from this area in football and basketball and baseball and anything else. He was very involved with the youth of our community. He was a lifeguard at the original Drake Pool, if you remember that old Drake Pool in the back, where he taught many young people to swim at that pool. He coached youth basketball and football, and he and the retired Captain John Lockhart were very visible at the work at the old Drake Recreation Center that used to be that building across from the parking lot in the back on Spencer Avenue.
Right.
Growing up, my sisters and I spent a great deal of time watching my father at church choir rehearsals and participating in men's basketball and softball leagues at the Drake Gym and the Drake Field, the old Drake Field now, which has some construction on it. He and the late John Dunn, the late Wilbur Payne, and retired Captain Lockhart and others were there to assist Coach Frank Tarver when he first started his football coaching career at Drake High. I could even remember attending the practices in some of the Drake High School football games at City Park before it became Felton Little. Dad retired from Uniroyal, Michelin in 1994 before the company shut down a few years later. My paternal grandmother was the late Mamie Scaife, who for years worked at Auburn University, Sagahatchee Golf Club, and the Elks Club. She was a cook who learned to cook from her mother, who was also a cook that worked also at the university at one time, provided domestic help, and cooked for the Depression era CCC camps. My maternal grandfather, Alfonso Moses, died before I was born, and my paternal grandfather, Willie Scaife, also moved to Chicago during the Great Migration. Our family's paternal side seems to trace back to the set of Arkansas Scaifes, and we're still digging on my mother's side. I was born in 1963 without civil rights, like many before me in many communities across this nation, and those of my color who had never voted. And up until Byron Allen's lawsuit with Charter and Comcast, the history that I learned was more of a preparatory information for boundaries and limits which no longer restricted people of color. But after this awareness and a resurgence of discriminatory acts, I too returned to the legal standing that I didn't have when I was born, that other white babies already had. It gives me a nasty taste in my mouth about racism because we were not given by the people in my state, my region, my country the same. But my family and community nurtured and developed me to not hate for hate, but to focus on achieving goals which could help our community and build a better society. Thus, I was encouraged to participate in progressive activities that were challenging and enjoyable where I learned team building skills about building relationships with people like-mindedness. We were taught to treat people like you want to be treated and that you can't make folk like you, but you can carry yourself and act and do what's right. Um, the choices that you make cause people to respect or disrespect you. Through football and basketball and other extracurricular activities, church and community service, I grew with my community. I attended and graduated from the Auburn City School System, Auburn University Southern Christian in Montgomery. I have been employed at UPS for close to 37 years, been in ministry for 34 years. I'm married to Sylvia, well, y'all call her Dr. Sylvia Scaife. We have 4 children, Sergeant Katia Scaife, newly anointed attorney Desmond Scaife, Desmond Scaife Jr., who's a professional musician and music seminar instructor who is now currently performing in Copenhagen, Denmark. And then we have Delia, who is in her second year of college at Southern Union. And one grandchild, Austin, who we are looking forward to seeing next week. And that's a snapshot of who I am and how I came to be who I am.
Debo, that's quite a legacy. I mean, your family goes back generations upon generations. You have really lived the experience of the change that we've had in this world, from a change where you were very limited in your goals, your ambitions, your opportunities. That's the world that your parents primarily, your grandparents grew up in, to a world that your daughter has now entered into college, and it's a totally different place. You and I have that, we get to be that asterisk, as we were part of that original group of children that came to Auburn City Schools when the schools fully integrated. And I can remember my mom and dad sitting me down that night before my first day of B Road Elementary School and talking to me about being in class now with Black children, which had been different because I'd been in a segregated kindergarten system. And just talking to me about that, not making it a big deal, but just letting me know that it was what it was. What was your recollection as you started school and everything became integrated all of a sudden here in Auburn in the late 60s?
I really don't remember too much. It's been a while, but there are some growing moments from time to time that I think of. Um, I do remember that I wasn't bothered too much nor uneasy because I had spent the previous year in a kindergarten setting at the Auburn University Child Study Center. So to me, it wasn't much of a big deal. I just knew that I was going to first grade and that I better not get in trouble.
How is that story different from the story that you and Sylvia had with your children as they started in the Auburn City Schools?
Oh man, it was nothing in comparison to it because they've been in integrated sessions and activities well before they started school, so it wasn't even a thought.
When you think about the world your daddy and your mama grew up in, the world that your grandparents grew up in, and now the world that your 4 children are growing up in. Do you reflect on those challenges that your dad and your mom faced versus maybe the world that your daughter's going to Southern Union in as we speak today?
Really, I do. Even in my preaching and teaching, bringing in the historical changes that we currently um, call to mind as uh, examples of just how good God has been in the process. I guess I'll say it like that. Because, my mother and father, even the employment and the wage differences and where they could live and where they could go, the limitations upon them were even lifted from me as I progressed in life and have been greatly open to my children. One thing that I think is important in the diversity and inclusion, if it were not for an improvement in diversity and inclusion, my children would not have been able to participate and excel in the way they have.
You know, your parents probably didn't even think about what the word diversity or inclusion meant. Certainly your grandparents, because that opportunity was flat out not going to be offered to them.
I don't know if we can say they didn't think about it because they spent a lot of time encouraging us to be the best that we could be because they knew at some point in time the way we were living would have to change for people to be exist and for life to life has to go somewhere. It can't stay in one place. So they taught us. I had a pastor, my pastor at St. Luke, before we built the new church. He came. He would always encourage me and tell me, "You could be the first black president." That's what he would say, and it went in line with the encouragement that my grandparents gave me in the educational arena and my father and mother gave me in the realm of society upon how to act and conduct myself, that you never know who's watching. The door will open here and you need to prepare yourself for what will come because you just don't know. So I don't know if my grandparents, I believe my grandparents did think about inclusion. They thought about opportunity. They thought about equality because every day they were living with restrictions and
Right.
boundaries and limits. So, one thing we say in the church, trouble don't last always, and it won't always be like this. So we've always had hope, and that was instilled into us from generation to generation.
You and I had a rich experience of getting to play football for the Auburn City Schools in junior high and at the high school. And, I remember it very fondly of the great friendships we have and all the experiences we had that started in the weight room in January and February and March and all the locker room times we spent and certainly bus rides to different places and then being on that field trying to win ball games together. My memories are very rich memories of that. It wasn't perfect, but it was very rich and positive memories. But obviously, I was a white guy in the late 70s, early 80s having those experiences. I remember you being a leader and an outstanding player. But at this season of your life, how do you look back on that from a race perspective of all of us getting along?
I had sisters at home. So when I went to practice, when I played on a team, um, that was my joy, and I loved it. My father always taught me because he was my first coach. He taught me that when you play on a team, your team is your family. You win together, you win as a family, you lose as a family. The way you practice, that's the way you're gonna play in your game, and that's the way I patterned my life. So when I hit the field, even as an early youth league football player, flag tag player, I never saw black and white. We were family. That's just the way I was taught. Even on the basketball court, that's just how I lived. And so I appreciated being with my brothers because we were both doing something that I loved.
Right. Debo, what does today, as we approach 2021, diversity and inclusion in the city of Auburn, how do you see that? Is it positive? Does it need work? Where do you see us as a community right now?
Well, I'm on the outside looking in because I live here, but I've been basically working the last 13 years in Russell County on my job. But from what I read and what I examine, and the promotions and the new leaders in certain departments, I see our city in a good space. I do, based upon what I know, and based upon where I lived and how the community has changed and the new people have come in and our community has grown. The recent promotion of the city manager, I think that's great. Someone who's been here in the city, and other promotions. Brother Cedric or the police department, just people in our community that are connected with our community, that love our community. And so I'm not in a position, I don't think, to say that there's something wrong with the diversion and inclusion in our city, the way our city is hiring and the way people are moving in our city.
Do you think African Americans in Auburn feel like this is a place that they can achieve their goals and enjoy life to the fullest, raise their family, have a good job?
Well, I do. I did. Um, that was one reason I was here. I stayed here after college because mom and grandmama were here, and I didn't want to miss their table, so I stayed. But I was fortunate when I came out of school that I could work um, the industries of textile industries, the Ampex and DP, and all those places provided an opportunity to work. But with the changing society, it was difficult to get a job when they left. But I think Auburn's a good place now, with the new industrial parks and on the beltway to the coast and between the different Hyundai and Honda manufacturers and suppliers. I think it's a good place to be and to work.
You know, you mentioned, I didn't realize your dad had a connection to Coach Talbert.
Right.
And, when the schools integrated, Coach Talbert came to Auburn City Schools, and I believe that he is the first African American coach at Auburn City Schools, and he's the first African American to be the head coach of one of the major sports at Auburn City Schools. And you and I were on that team when he became the basketball coach at Auburn City Schools in 1980. And besides he being tough and rough on us, um, I don't remember it being that big a deal that Coach Talbert became the coach because he deserved the job, and certainly his record has shown that he deserved the job.
Yeah, yeah. I agree. I agree. If you go in the mall, there's a big picture of
Yes,
Coach Talbot and the late Lieutenant John Dunn with some of the ball players from Drake.
right,
Um, to be able to experience um, watching him and growing with him.
right.
Because we were little boys when he came, and we were out there with our fathers on the field with him. I can even remember some of the practices and playing in City Park, I think on Tuesday night before it became Felton Little. To us, it was a big deal because it's a position that had never been held or never been done before.
Right.
And you always look for mentors and you always look for role models and you always look for success stories to motivate you and to encourage you and promote you because we were still dealing and are still now dealing with a mindset of what certain people cannot do, what certain women cannot do, what certain sexuality folk gender cannot do, and what certain folk from the left side or the right side of the track can't do. So as far as it being a big deal, it was a momentous movement, I think, for us, because you know we always enjoyed all of our coaches. You know, for years, Coach Ogle lived in our neighborhood, and we would go play with Coach Ogle. You know, just he was part of the neighborhood. So
Right.
it's important that all kids be able to see somebody like them somewhere.
Well, and he was certainly special. Has the field house named for him at Auburn Junior High, is in the Hall of Fame, won a state championship. Debo, this past summer, there was the tragedy in Minnesota where George Floyd was killed. And certainly all around our country, there was different types of events that happened, some that were very, very tragic. Here in our community, we had a couple of different Sundays where we had demonstrations, marches. Um, I don't know if you participated or were around for any of those, but just your thought as a guy that's lived here all his life, seeing that occur in the middle of his hometown. What was your thought on how Auburn reacted to that?
Well, my children participated in it, and they were encouraged by the participation of the community. I'm just sorry it took 8 minutes and 46 seconds of video for America to see that was a problem and that my community and others felt the need to protest. Um, and the reason I'm sorry because it should have never happened. Every other killing of a citizen or a police officer, it should never happen. I just believe as people like the late Elijah Cummings that we are better than that and we can do better. I think the conversations are good, but the history books and protest speakers have been pushing conversations for years. I think the conversation ought to and should shift to what the problem is and stop using "it's better than it was" band-aid to cover what we've stopped attempting to reach: full diversity and full inclusion of America and the dream. I I'm going a little further. I never really liked the Rooney Rule in the NFL because it said one. You need to include at least one.
Right.
But it was a start, and teams found ways to dismiss it, whether they were serious about including African Americans or not. How serious the lovely village on the plain is, and how serious the response is to racism and inclusion. How will the city remove vestiges of segregation or preference which might remain? I think only time will tell if our community response is above board or subpar. I just pray that it does not take another 8 minutes and 46 seconds for folk to realize that something wrong and needs fixing immediately. I think our community stood strong and stood tall and made a strong statement to those that were onlookers and those that knew about it. And I think it's important to for the community to let the world know and let each other know where we stand when it comes to racism and mistreatment of people.
Debo, if you had an audience with the mayor, what advice would you give the mayor regarding Auburn's challenges with diversity and inclusion?
Well, again, I'm on the outside looking in, and my personal experiences in my city uh, have mostly all been good. That's because I love my city and I love my community and I love where I am. Um, but in thinking, one thing I think is important is the conversation. Um, what comes to mind, Brother Ron, is the J.C. Field. Every time I ride by the J.C. Field, I see the Jan Dempsey Art Center on our 50-yard line.
Yeah, it is.
Next to the Frank Brown Rec Center that was built during our youth.
It was.
And that was a great expansion of our city to include young people of all segments of life and in adult recreation. And I think that progress from not having to having is a good model for anything that we do, or anything that you do. The racial differences Now in our city, I don't know where they exist because all of our children grow up and come up together, and they're a whole lot closer and a whole lot more connected than I think many generations before. So any advice I would give you on racial diversity and inclusion is as long as you can do it where it's fair and right and equitable to those involved, I think we'll do good.
Final question, Debo. How would you encourage our white brothers and sisters and our black brothers and sisters? How would you encourage them to come together and make this the best community it can be?
Again, I go back to the JC Field. The old JC Field was a place for conversation and community interaction that centered around the children, our future. You know, folk would ride by and look and wave and blow, and some people would stop and stand on the fence and just to watch and converse. And that was a good place for our city, our small city at that time. I believe many conversations occurred that didn't concern football.
Right.
Whatever or if ever a common interest that we care about enough to gather about and take action, then we should consider it. Having a conversation starts with how you doing and ends with what can we accomplish together. I think that JC Field was important to just about everything in Auburn because you could have a pickup game there and meet folk there and come together and you learn other people in the community. And I think it starts with a common interest and a common coming together, something that we're concerned about. If we're concerned enough about it, we'll come together on it and take a move on it. So I'm hoping that whatever the issues are that exist in our area, that people will care enough to come and sit down and talk about it and work for a solution.
Debo, thank you for your time this afternoon. I appreciate you being part of One Conversation. I appreciate your friendship over the years. Um, you've been a great part of our community, and your wife, congratulations. She was voted the Teacher of the Year at Auburn High School, and she is well deserving and well loved and well respected by all those students that she impacts each and every day. So congratulations to you and her for that award. And I hope your family has a happy holiday and a Merry Christmas and a Happy New Year.
Yes, sir. Thank to you. Thank you to you and your staff for inviting me. And I hope I've been able to do some of the things you asked for. And I appreciate you and proud of you and want you to continue on with the work of the city that's before you. And whatever we can do to help, we're available to assist in any way we can. And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to you and the staff at the City of Auburn.
Thank you, Debo. Have a good day.
You too. Bye-bye.